There's something absent from the conversation of most online lessons. It's often just information, information, information. Now, when I make videos, I imagine I'm talking to you as if we're in the same room, and I share knowledge and tips to help you progress. That's my intention. But there's one thing that could make all of this futile that I often think about. And that is whether you have the technical foundation, whether you're in a good place with both hands in terms of technique. So in today's video, I want to share what I think are the technical foundations required, because playing jazz is hard enough already. If you're also battling technique issues, you're going to be getting very frustrated, and it might not be obvious why things are so hard. Good technique is playing music with efficiency, so that's using the body and the instrument in a healthy way. I'd also say it's having good command over the instrument and being able to execute what I want to play with ease. Now, there's a famous quote about practice that I think relates to having command of your instrument. It's from Louis Armstrong, and it goes like this: "If I don't practice for a day, I know it. If I don't practice for 2 days, the critics know it. And if I don't practice for 3 days, the public knows it." And that, for me, is about someone being at one with their instrument, feeling connected with it, which technique is central to. So why does playing jazz require such a high degree of technique? Here's a few thoughts. Firstly, the difficulty with jazz is that improvising requires us to play things we haven't necessarily played before. Technique is easier to develop when you know the music you are playing and what movements each hand needs to make. You could also argue that we use more range of the fretboard than, say, a rock or a blues guitar player who might stick to a couple positions of the pentatonic. I know that's generalizing, it's not always the case, but if you watch a fluent jazz musician, they're able to use the full range of their instrument. And solid technique is key to being able to do that. Another reason jazz is a bit unforgiving and you need solid technique is the fact most jazz guitar players play with a clean tone, meaning you can't hide behind effects. Also, it often has a mellow character, meaning being heavy-handed, so, bad technique, it won't work, it will just sound harsh. So if this is so important, why don't people talk about technique more often? I think sometimes it's assumed that if you're playing jazz, you probably established good technique from what you studied before coming to jazz. But I don't think it gets as much discussion when it comes to learning jazz guitar, because it's not as alluring, it's not a quick win on how to master jazz guitar in a 10-minute video. It's not great for clickbait videos and titles and so forth. It takes time to develop a solid base of technique, and then that has to be maintained, in my opinion. I also think that when people have been playing guitar for a long time, they probably take their technique, or maybe the details of it, for granted, as it's just become second nature to them. And I can think back to when I very first started teaching, and it was then that I had to kind of reverse engineer how I developed all this technique that I wasn't really aware that I had. For example, there was lots of muting that I was doing. I wasn't aware I was doing it, but it helped me achieve a good clean sound when playing single notes. So let me take this directly to you and your technique now. Here's some questions I would ask to assess how strong your technique is. So if I was meeting a student for the first time, I'd assess a few things in regards to technique. To begin with, looking at their posture, how a person uses their body. I'd be looking at how they sit, not compromising their spine or neck or slouching over the instrument. Assuming they play sat down, I'd be thinking about what chair they use and what they do with their feet. I'd then look at how they're using their hands and wrists, and my general rule is not doing anything ergonomically that looks or feels unnatural. Because if you do, you're going to be putting stress on your body, and at some point that can cause an injury and stop you playing for a period of time or altogether in some cases. And when listening to a student, I would listen carefully for how relaxed they are. This comes across firstly how they use their fretting hand. Hopefully fingers are nice and close up to the fret, and that critically there's only just enough pressure for the notes to come out and no more, because too much pressure and the notes will sound tense and may even sound slightly out of tune. And good technique is also about clean notes, which means muting. So I do a lot of that with my fretting hand, so I'd be listening out for how clean their playing is, in the sense of no ringing open strings as they move around the fretboard. As for the picking hand, and just speaking about plectrum bass players here, for me the most critical thing is a loose grip of the plectrum, and then it's the mechanics of how you use it. And obviously you want to be as efficient as possible, so making as small a movement as possible. Now on Patreon, I've started a new monthly series on technique. Each month I share a video on how I practice and maintain my own technique. And this is a video in which I share ideas for players with different levels of technique so that you can incorporate these ideas into your own practice, and it can sit with where you're currently at and help you develop that technique over time. Patrons can also send me a video of their playing for a technical evaluation, and I'll put some thoughts together on specific things I think they should practice. Thanks as ever for tuning in. Please leave a comment with how you feel about your current level of technique. Where would you rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10? 10 being really solid technique, 1 being it's non-existent. Hopefully you're somewhere in the middle or getting closer towards that 10. Don't forget, jazz guitar lessons uploaded every Monday here on YouTube. Until next time, you take care.